This video is not financial advice. Consult a professional financial advisor if you intend to make any moves contained herein. This video is for entertainment purposes only.
All right. Okay, for today's session, I want to talk about how to convert money. A lot of people ask me the same question over and over. Some of you may already know how to do this, but there's some tips and tricks that maybe I can help share. We need to convert Canadian dollars to US dollars. And the first things that you would do is use your brokerage. However, they allow you to convert funds using the forex. But I'm not sure how many people actually notice that you're not really getting the best prices or best exchange rates when you do that. Typically, banks or brokers will tack on between 2 to 3%. I've seen some places tack on only like 1.5, but still, that's quite substantial if you're doing that every time you want to convert your money. There's even brokerages where they do this for you and they don't even tell you about it. So basically, when you go and buy US equities, they will take your Canadian dollars, exchange it to USD, tack on that little spread, and then give you the shares. And then when you go and sell it, they do the reverse. So round trip, you could potentially be hit by 3 to 6% then, right? Because it's double. It goes back and forth. And I know that places like Wealthsimple is very known for doing that. So I would not even recommend anybody buying US equities at Wealthsimple because of that reason. If you really think about it, every transaction you make, you're getting this crazy loss.
Crazy loss.
Yeah. Well, and so we're just talking about how to most efficiently transfer your money or convert your money from Canadian dollars to US dollars. Because you know how banks, they'll charge you
a premium.
2 to 3% spread, right?
Uh-huh.
Like you're never really gonna get spot price. Well, that's how
Yeah.
they make their money, which is fine. But there's ways to minimize that. So it really depends on where you're doing this. I think the popular brokerages we're using here is TD. We're using Questrade. I also use interactive brokers, but that's a different topic altogether because at interactive brokers, this doesn't happen. Since they allow you to trade a foreign exchange, so you directly would buy and sell US dollars on the exchange directly. So you don't really incur any spread aside from the commissions, of course. So do you guys trade at Questrade or TD?
Questrade.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll start off with like how you would do this at Questrade. So there's this guy, I guess he came up with this move called the Norbert's Gambit. What this move does is it takes advantage of equities or shares that listed on both Canadian and US exchanges at the same time. Taking advantage of cross-listed equities. So what that means is the same shares are being traded on the Canadian exchange and a US exchange. So basically you have the same asset, but traded at different exchanges. Typically what happens is the price difference between what is listed in the Canadian exchange and the US exchange is exactly the exchange rate. This is because there's people arbitraging between the exchanges. So if there's a way for someone to make money, they're most likely take that way and make the money. For example, if you see a store selling a carton of milk for like $2, and then down the street you see a store selling a carton of milk for $4, what you essentially can do is go buy from the cheaper place and go try to sell it at the more expensive place. So same thing with the markets. If there's like a difference or like an arbitrage opportunity like that, like if someone sees that the price on the Canadian exchange is cheaper than the price on the American exchange, cheaper meaning accounting for exchange rate is cheaper, then it's likely someone can just buy those shares on the Canadian exchange and then go and sell them on the American exchange and pocket that little difference even after conversion. So there's people actively trying to exploit these arbitrage opportunities. So that's why this strategy works. So what you typically do, the strategy is you would buy an equity, a share that's cross-listed on the Canadian exchange with like Canadian dollars, then go ahead and then transfer that same equity or that same security into your US dollar account, or change it into the US listed shares and sell it into US dollars, then essentially what you've done is converted your Canadian dollars into US dollars, I guess minus 2 commissions, because you need to pay 1 commission to buy and 1 commission to sell. And I believe at Questrade, the commissions are $5. So essentially you have spent $10 doing this, I guess, at most, right? You'll spend $5 on the Canadian side buying, and you'll spend $5 on the US side selling. So basically the entire transaction costs you only like $10 roughly to do this. And you're essentially getting a spot rate. Does that make sense?
Yep. So this commission, okay, I am very new to this, so it could be a dumb question. So this commission is not related to how much you trade. It's a fixed price, is it?
It's tiered. Okay. And it really depends on your brokerage.
Okay.
If you look at go on your brokerage website, and then you can see the exact commission schedule. I believe up to a certain number of shares at Questrade is like $5. Like, don't quote me on this. And you can even optimize that even a little bit further, because if you use an ETF to do this, Questrade doesn't charge you any commissions for buying ETFs. So essentially, you're only paying 1 leg of commission. Like basically, you're only paying $5 to do this, if you do it right.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So that's another thing, right? I want to talk about in terms of how to even optimize this further. I believe a lot of people are using this Horizons US dollars ETF, which with the symbol DLR, to facilitate this Norbert's Gambit, because it's essentially a ETF that just holds currency, right? So it just invests in US dollars. So because you're using this to facilitate your exchange, you're not taking the extra risk of, let's say you picked a different stock. Let's say you picked the TD stock, right? Which I know is cross-listed. If you buy TD stock, change it over to the US exchange, there's going to be a lag in between when you do this, right? When you go and sell it, what if TD Bank drops, right? Then you would have lost some money. But on the other hand, if it goes up, then you would have made some money. But the whole idea is to exchange your money. It's not to, take on this risk of a stock price movement. So this product was created, I guess, to sort of either you want to invest in US dollars or created to facilitate this Norbert's Gambit. On the Canadian side, DLR, the price of DLR moves basically corresponding to the value of US dollars, right? The exchange rate. So if US dollar goes up, DLR gets more expensive. If US dollar goes down, DLR gets cheaper. Whereas on the other side, on the US side, DLR is typically pegged to something close to $10. And I think they try to get it as close as $10 as possible, but over time there's a drift. If you're really doing a Norbert's Gambit and you don't hold DLR for more than a week or two, you're not really going to see this drift, because it moves maybe a penny. This drift is only like a penny within months, right? You can look at it, historical prices. So if you're not holding DLR for a long time, like this will not affect you. Basically, the moment you buy DLR, you're locked in your exchange rate. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's other things to consider, right? Let's say you want to convert some money. What I've experienced is better to do it in increments of 100 shares of DLR. I know a lot of guides out there would just tell you, okay, take the amount of money you want to convert, divide it by the share price of DLR, and that's how many shares of DLR you should be buying. What I find is when you do that, you end up with a share number that is not a multiple of 100. And when you're dealing with shares numbers that is not a multiple of 100, it comes with certain quirks, should I say, right? I guess it's from like legacy systems where a long time ago you can only buy round lots, which what that means is like one lot is typically 100 shares. If you want to do anything other than that, they're called like odd lots, and then it comes with like different fees and things like that. So same thing with Questrade. I think if you want to take advantage of the no commission trade on the one side, you really should stick to a multiple of 100 shares. Otherwise, you can be tacked on with ECN fees or some other fees that would make your trade not free, so to speak. The other part is when you are trading odd lots. So let's say after my calculations, I can convert 271 shares of DLR. I would either advise you to put enough money to get 300 shares or only do 200 shares. Because in the past, when I tried to buy or sell odd lots, you can get partial fills. So my order would sit in the queue, either the buy order or the sell order, and I would only fill 11 shares or 71 shares or just 200, and then your 71 doesn't get filled. When that happens, you're trying to sell it on the other side. You didn't sell your entire 271, so you end up having to spend more money to convert the rest, right? Either you got to spend more commission to buy that 71, buy the 200 the next day, or using another transactions to try to sell off the amount that you haven't sold. So that also happens. And this happens at almost any brokerage. It's just much easier if you just stick to multiples of 100. In that case, you avoid these problems. So I've talked about like what's the idea, right? So when you go and actually go do it at Questrade, what you can do is look up DLR, find it, there's going to be a price, calculate the number of shares that you can buy, round it off, put in, I guess, a limit order at the ask price to buy it if you want to buy it right away. But here's another gotcha at Questrade. To get that free ETF trade, they have something what's called adding liquidity and removing liquidity from the market. If you put in an order at the ask, you're removing liquidity from the market, so you're not going to get that free ETF trade. So they make you, put your limit order at the bid. So if you put it at the bid, there's no guarantee that you'll fill. But generally speaking, if you leave it there long enough, it'll fill. So that's also why I'm advocating don't do like odd lots. It makes it that much harder to fill. So you buy it. After you buy it, you can open a chat box or give them a call. But my best, I guess, preferred method is just to email them. Email support@questrade.com. And basically, all you have to tell them is this. For this account number, I would like to journal over 300 shares of DLR to DLR.U on the US side. You can tell them that in the chat. You can tell them that on the phone, or you can just simply send them an email. I prefer the email ones because I don't want to be waiting on hold for hours. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. Even with the chat, you'll be waiting for like half an hour, and then you got to talk to somebody, right? With the email, just send it and forget about it, and check your account every once in a while to see when that happens, when that DLR.U shows up on in your account. Typically, it takes anywhere from 2 days to, I think the longest I've ever seen is like 4 or 5 days. And you know what? This is probably just a Questrade thing. I don't know. Typically, these trades settle 2 business days. You gotta wait until the trade settles, and then you should see your DLR.U end up in your account. And DLR.U is the same shares, right, that you bought previously as DLR. It's just now these are shares that are traded on the US exchange. They'll have a different dollar value, most likely around $10 or so. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so you probably wonder okay, is this time sensitive? Do I have to sell these DLR.U right away? I guess my answer is not really, but you do get that little drift, right? So I would recommend if you're doing this for the Norbert's Gambit, just sell it, whatever price it is at, usually around the $10, and then have the funds be in the US dollars. And also there's a setting in Questrade that you need to set about selling trades. If you want to settle trades in what currency? I'm not sure if that setting is still there, but I think that's something you need to be aware of. You should probably have it enabled to settle trades in this currency that it happens in. So you don't have by accident have your trade settlement in Canadian dollars. So when you go sell your DLR.U, they'll convert your US dollars back to Canadian. Make sure like that's set up and you don't get messed up from that setting. So that's basically how you would convert Canadian dollars into US dollars. You can do the other way, right? You can do the other way where you buy the DLR.U, have Questrade journal over the shares to DLR on the Canadian side, and then sell the Canadian side. But bear in mind that when you do this move in the opposite way, you are getting the exchange rate when you're selling. Because buying DLR.Us are always around $10. That leg is set, is fixed, but your currency fluctuation is not fixed on the other side. So the rate that exchange rate you're effectively getting is not locked in. It's only when you go and sell that on the other side. On the other hand, when you're converting Canadian to US, your exchange rate is essentially fixed the moment you bought the DLR. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any questions so far?
So for the ECN fees,
Yeah.
you're talking about that and the odd lot. I was kind of a bit confused about that.
Yeah, like I'm not too 100% sure how to calculate ECN fees, but if you look closely at some of your trades, this is a fee that Questrade passes along from the exchange. Honestly, I have no idea how to calculate that. You really have to ask a Questrade.
Okay.
Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. And generally speaking, if you're dealing with whole lots, if you're dealing with adding liquidity to the market, you don't get charged those fees. And there's also an SEC fee. Like I really don't know when those things get charged.
Okay.
So if you look at your free ETF buys, right? Like sometimes it's not exactly free. And when they're not exactly free, it's probably you've violated one of these things. Like either you remove liquidity from the market, or you're dealing with something stupid like odd lots or something.
Okay. So you're saying I can reduce the ECN fees if, let's say, when I buy it, I just buy it at the bid instead of the ask?
Yes. Yes. And that's just how, Questrade charges their commission, right?
Okay.
Like these things, like for example, if you trade at TD Waterhouse, or what they call themselves today, direct investing, you never see those things. Like they just have like a flat like $9.99 commission, and you're really not exposed to those fees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just one thing you need to look at or watch out for at Questrade. Their commission structure is not that straightforward. Like it's not the $5 trades, right? It's $5 trade plus ECN and SEC fees.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can talk about how you do it at TD. I think some of us trade there. Basically, the gist is the same. Like you go and you purchase your DLR shares on the Canadian side. You have to get them journaled over to the US side. The only difference is at TD, you have separate accounts for Canadian dollars and US dollars. So when you call them to get the shares over to journal over, you actually have to tell them, okay, for account, whatever account number, I would like to journal over these shares to this other account, which is like the US account. So that is just that little extra step. Again, if you call them, you got to be placed on hold, right? I know that a lot of guides out there tell you to call them after the first trade settles. You don't really have to do that. You can actually just call them after you buy it. What happens is the agent will place this, request to journal shares in queue. So basically, it will happen immediately after your trade settles. So you really don't have to wait until it settles. You can just call them and they'll just like queue it up for you. What I like to do now is they have recently launched a new feature to perform security transfers between accounts. So you can actually take advantage of that. After you buy your DLR, wait until it settles, or wait until you can actually do the transfer, because I think it's like a new feature that they're still working on its quirks. Like sometimes certain days it doesn't work, but when it's working, you can do it. where you just click on securities transfer, pick the account that you purchased the DLR in, pick the shares that you want to transfer, and then you pick the US account to transfer to, and it'll do it like it's self-serve, like you don't have to talk to anybody. So I guess with that route, all you have to do is you have to make sure that when you click securities transfer, it actually works. It's not telling you, oh, we're experiencing technical difficulties, do it again later. When it's working, if you're allowed to select your shares and it actually lets you transfer it to the other account, then you should be okay. And then when you see it in your US account, make sure when you sell it, you sell DLR.U. And the way that you can tell is make sure the price is around $10, right? When you go and sell it. There's a few times where when I click on the sell button, even though it's DLR.U, it's quoting me the Canadian side security. Because like I think in TD you can select US or Canada, right? By default, it selects the Canada side. Just make sure that the US side is selected when you go and sell this. The indicator there is it should be around $10. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I think people ask is, okay, how much money do I need to transfer for this to be worthwhile? If you do a little bit of math, what's 2 to 3% of the amount that you're transferring? If it's greater than round trip at TD, you're spending $20, right? Around $20, $9.99 Canadian, $9.99 US. Whichever way is cheaper, I guess. If you're dealing with $2,000, it's probably already worth it. And if you're doing this at Questrade, it's even cheaper, right? You can potentially get this done at $5.
Yeah. So 2% of $1,000 is like $20. So
Exactly. So you already broke even with transferring $1,000, right?
Yep.
The only part is, I guess, there's some lag time, right, when you do this. So if there's some US stock that you really want to buy like right this moment, you would forego that 2%, right? But 2% is still huge. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
What I advocate is, okay, if you know you're going to make some investments, you should really get your money ready and just do this ahead of time and just have the fun sitting there. If you wait until the last moment, this Norbert's Gambit, I guess one of the downside is you have to wait. Minimum wait time of at least 2 days, right, for the trade to settle. And like if you're sending the email to Questrade, you gotta wait until whoever it is that picks up your ticket performs the journaling, and then whenever it shows up as a DLR.U. I haven't really been able to figure out like how long it takes. For me, typically it could take anywhere from 2 to 5 days over there.
Yeah, I find that when I do it, like it takes 2 days for the first purchase to settle, and then 2 days
Oh,
for
okay.
the US one to settle. So usually 4 days.
Okay, so good. So you've been already doing this.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hope you get something out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Any other questions? Oh, I have another one. Sometimes people ask me, why should I put a limit order at the bid versus just doing a market order? That's a trade-off too, right? If you're doing it on Questrade, if you don't put it at the bid, you're going to be hit with your commissions. The other part is if you put your limit order at the ask, you'll fill right away, but you'll pay your commissions. So I guess it really depends. If you put it at a market, you're guaranteed to fill right away. So if you want to do this like the quickest way possible, you can do your market orders. But the inherent danger of market orders is it could execute at any price, really. That's reasonable. So now, who's going to determine what's reasonable? But typically speaking, like out of 20 plus years of trading, I knock on wood, I really haven't really been burned by market orders. But you hear stories out there, so it's up to you whether you want to take that risk. Typically, you get either the ask or you get a little bit better than the ask. Sometimes you might even get the bid, right? Like I've never, bought a stock worth, let's say $10. No one has ever filled me at $100, right? Although, you know what, that could happen. So limit orders are always the safest, but it comes with, okay, you're not really guaranteed to fill at your price. Unless, if when you're buying, you move it to the ask, right? And when you're selling, you move it to the bid.
Oh, one question.
Yeah.
Can you do this with other stocks that have both US and Canadian platforms, or
Yeah,
only best
of
with
course.
Horizon ETF?
No, you can do it with any stock that's traded on both sides. There is this securities ID. So there's this unique identifier for every single thing that's traded on an exchange, right? So as long as they have the same ID, they can be journaled over. So you just have to make sure that the ID is the same on both sides.
Oh, what's the ID called again?
It's called the CUSIP number.
Oh, I see.
So it stands for the Committee on Uniform Securities Identification Procedures number. So as long as the thing is listed on both exchanges with the same CUSIP, then it's the same thing.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so like I said, if you use, there's pros and cons to be using something else, right? Because with this Horizons product, you have to look at how liquid it is. So if it's a low volume day, you might not get your fills right away, right? Or your closeness to the spot price of the exchange, it may not be that close. So if you use a security that is heavily traded, like more so than this Horizon thing, like product, then you may be able to get conversion rate closer. But the con of using something else is now you introduce the risk of holding this security for the 2 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like anything can happen in these 2 days. Like you could make money, you can lose money. Like if your sole purpose is to exchange money, like you may not want to introduce that risk into your this transaction.
I see.
Yeah, so there's pros and cons, and DLR works fine. It's just sometimes the volume is not good, and you could be stuck on that bid limit price for the whole day. Like you might not even get it. You might get it the next day. So it's really up to you. But in that case, like move it to the ask, pay that $5 commission, right? So does everybody like everyone are now Norbert Gambit experts now?
Yes.
I can hope so.
You hope so?
No,
Well,
I'm
you gotta
yet to
do one
read up a
yourself,
lot.
huh?
As you're talking, I'm googling most of your terms, so I
Oh,
still have a lot to catch
no,
up on.
you can ask me what these terms are.
Yeah, but mine will be too basic question like market orders, limit orders. Let me read up a little.
I keep getting those questions as well. Not many people know all the differences or the nuances between the different order types. Quickly explain, like limit order is when you put in limit order, it will never go above your price that you set, like whether you buy or sell, right? So if something is if
Okay.
you put a limit order, I want to buy this with a limit of $10,
Mm-hmm.
it will only execute at $10 or less.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you were to go sell it, it will only execute at $10 or more.
Okay. Got it.
Otherwise, it won't happen. But if you put in market order,
Mm-hmm.
basically it will buy and sell at whatever the ask is or whatever the bid is.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so with market orders, it's whatever the person is asking when you buy, and it's whatever the other person is bidding when you sell. So you know how when you buy a house, someone is always like, "Hey, I want to sell this for like $1 million."
Mm-hmm.
That's just the ask, right?
Right.
When you go and buy it, then you're like, "No, I'm not gonna pay $1 million. How about 900,000?" So that's your bid. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's like no transaction, there's gonna be a bid and there's gonna be an ask.
Right.
So, if you want to go in and buy this, and the most you ever want to spend is 950, then you put a limit order for 950 to buy,
Okay. Okay.
right? If you go, I want to put in a market order, it's just going to buy for $1 million.
Million
Yeah,
dollars. Yeah.
because that's what
Okay.
the person's asking.
Mm-hmm.
Or, that's the idea, right? Like it might not work out that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe like, by the time you put it in, that person is like, oh, you know what? I might not sell it for $1 million. I might only get like 990. right? Then your market order becomes 990, right?
Right. Okay.
Because these things are dynamic. Yeah, good. All right. I guess we can close off this topic if you guys have no more, guys and girls have no more questions.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Like, don't dismiss that 2 to 3%. A lot of people think, oh, that's just a little bit of money. When you make enough trades, it really eats up your returns. And like 2 or 3% is huge in terms of returns. It really affects you.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the cost of commissions. Like, you know how I'm saying, like, hey, you can do it here for $20 but a TD, but you can do it for $10 or even $5 at Questrade. Over time, that adds up. It adds up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like, you don't feel it, but when you look at your bills, you'll notice it. Yeah. Well, good chat. We'll continue. And
Okay.
Yeah.
anything you guys want to talk about, send me a note and I will talk about it. And hopefully I can share some insights.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, have a good evening, everybody.
You too. Bye.
Bye,
Good
everyone.
evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.